Member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to speak on these bills with a hefty dose of caution. This is a government that is always looking for savings wherever it can find them, a government that will take cost-cutting to a knife's edge before it impacts those who are trying to get a university education in Australia. My electorate of Werriwa has access to 3 world-class universities: Western Sydney University, the University of Wollongong and the University of New South Wales, which is based at Liverpool Hospital. More universities still have signed expression of interest for the Aerotropolis at the new Badgerys Creek Airport. The electorate of Werriwa is also the most vulnerable electorate in Australia when it comes to fluctuating cost of living pressures. And therefore, I worry, Speaker, that if universities even mention the prospects of sharing the tax burden through student fees increases, bright young people from my electorate may see a university education as beyond their reach. And that is something that we can't do. We must encourage our youngest to go to university. Deputy Speaker, I'm proud to say it was Labor that created Australia's world-renowned income contingent loan scheme, the HELP scheme, Higher Education Loan Program. For those students who might otherwise be deterred by the cost of a university education, this loan program says clearly, if you're not reaping the benefits of an increased earning capacity, you don't have to pay the loan back to the government until you do. Labor believes it's fair that students make a contribution to the cost of their higher education, but students should never have to pay these fees up front. In principle, universities paying to have loans administered seems reasonable. However, we must ensure these costs do not touch students, making universities even more unaffordable. Students in Australia already pay the 6th highest fees in the OECD. This is why Labor will be referring these bills to a Senate Education and Employment Legislation Committee for an inquiry. Equality in access to tertiary education has been utterly transformational in my family. My generation was the first in my family to attend university and benefit from the opportunities that higher education can provide. My sister, Kathy Mee, of whom I am very proud, attended the University of Sydney. Kathy recalls that when she first attended Sydney, there were very few students in that first economics class that came as far away as Liverpool. And certainly most of them didn't come from west of the GPO. The opportunities that the university has given my sister have been extraordinary to watch. She has a PhD and she is also a lecturer at the University of Newcastle, and they would not have been provided in any other way. My sons too have all attended university, so in just 2 generations the wealth of opportunities provided by university education have been incredible to observe. My sons work as secondary school teachers and graphic designers. Access to tertiary education has been my boys' pathway to opportunity and prosperity. It makes me nervous when the government starts putting legislation like this forward, because I know how fragile the possibility of going to university is for some Australians. And the university education has meant that my eldest son has been able to join the housing market and just recently buy a house. That's probably something he wouldn't have done if he continued his previous job, working very hard, no less hard than what he currently works, but in retail, considering that penalty rates have now been cut. It is with the utmost caution that we on this side of the House provide our support to the bill. We know, Deputy Speaker, that this is a government that seems to cut, trim and hollow out till only a skeleton is left. And a skeleton of a higher education system is no option but to pass on increased cost burdens to those who access it. These charges must not flow back to the students. They really mustn't. We do not want to see higher fees and higher charges for those trying to access a university education within Australia. The decision to recap undergraduate paces will devastate participation rates in higher education. Recent data from the Mitchell Institute tells us that because of this government's decisions, up to 235,000 Australians could miss out on a university education by 2031. That's only 12 years away. Labor wants to see more participation in higher education in Australia. We want to boost the number of students accessing the benefit that a university degree brings. And I note what the member for Laura said about IQ and your postcode. She is absolutely correct. It doesn't matter where you live, but quite often your ability to afford to go to university does matter. And so it is very important that we make these things access to everyone. It's not fair that students from the North Shore of Sydney are 5 times more likely to go to universities than those in the Moreton Bay region of Queensland. Labor wants to change this. We've already announced $174 million in equity and pathways funding that will fund mentoring and pathways for students from areas with low university graduation rates. Such funding measures are critical. The value of personal mentoring for students who have little family precedents for navigating university systems is critical, because if you can see it, you know you can do it. Labor knows how much it means to have someone walking beside a first-time student and who has done it all before. The funding for this scheme comes on top of Labor's $10 billion commitment to return to the demand-driven funding system from 2020, which will see around 200,000 more Australians over 12 years access a university education. What's more, Deputy Speaker, it is Labor that will pull $300 million into a Universities Futures Fund that will be dedicated to updating the teaching and research facilities at our major universities. These are the policies of our party, and we value higher education. Our choice on university funding comes to the next election is the choice on university funding to the next election is crystal clear. A Labor government will proactively fund Australian universities, giving students who have the ability and the gumption for hard work every opportunity to access a university education. Who knows, if we give everybody that opportunity, we may find the things that are needed to look at our futures and cure cancer and all the other things that are currently eluding us. We don't want to slam the door on universities to anybody in our country who wants to go. In closing, Deputy Speaker, Labor's commitment to higher education is relevant here because, just like where there's smoke, there's fire. Where there have been little snips, there are funding cuts looming overhead. And where there are funding cuts, there will be lost opportunities for bright young Australians all over the country to access the benefits of a university education, and furthermore, the rest of us to have the benefits of that university education when they come back to the workforce. Asking universities to contribute towards the cost of loan provision is an appropriate measure, but it is critical we ensure this taxation measure is not passed on to the students. Universities must shoulder the burden of the tax. And while supporting this bill in principle, it must be submitted for further inquiry. Labor will continue to fight for affordable university education, and putting this bill under the microscope is no exception.
I thank the honourable member.